People say you knowingly misled startups, multiple startups simultaneously. Why should anyone trust your word?
Like, people around me know me. I'm a sleep hater. Like, I hate sleeping.
I'm just curious, did you try to interview for frontier labs as well, like OpenAI or DeepMind stuff?
I used to watch a lot of anime growing up. One of my favorite characters was this character called Orochimaru from Naruto. He wanted to become immortal because he thought that one lifespan is not enough to know everything in the world. I think it's the same with computer science as well. Like, there's so much to know. I have no reason to do the same mistake again.
They tracked your GitHub activity, you were contributing to some other place or some other organization.
Okay. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to GroundZero Talks. I'm Himanshu. Today's special one. It's our first ever in-person episode. So if you're watching this, I hope you're really liking the vibe, the energy, and the ultimate setup we have made it so far. It's been coming long. Now today's guest need no show build-up. We have with us Soham Parekh, a man who has been at the center of probably the wildest engineering saga in the recent startup memory. So known, or you say infamous, as everyone's favorite founding engineer, Soham Parekh has been everywhere. You say from viral tweets to heated founder DMs. We have been living the rock. So, and funny backstory behind this podcast is what happened was I saw a lot of fake Soham profiles and floating around on Twitter for some time. I spotted the real one, real Soham Parekh, and it realized that he has been following me for quite some time. And I just posted what in the world, and some guy just commented that let's bring GroundZero Pod with Soham. And I said, I tagging Soham, let's do it. And Soham said, let's do. And so we are here. And so let's dive in. No filters, no dodging. We are going to unpack it all. The story, the fallout, the hustle, the regrets, and every experience of Soham Parekh. Hi Soham, how are you feeling?
Much better. This is my second time in Bangalore and it's not very different from the last time. It's tending to flooding, but really nice.
I really guess you like the weather.
The weather is awesome. People actually just sold me weather on coming here, so that hasn't disappointed for sure.
Pretty interesting. So I'll start fresh. How will you define Soham Parekh?
I mean, I guess you put it right. I'm everyone's favorite founding engineer at this point. But there isn't much to me, honestly. Like, I am a very boring persona behind. I spend most of my time in front of a computer. And that's something that I've grown up to love doing a lot. I've not been a video game person, so most of it has been coding. Sometimes for one company, sometimes for multiple. But yeah, I guess you can just call me as, like your everyday tech nerd, pretty much.
So, like, you've been a tech nerd from school days, like coding, like a lot of people you just start from, like what I encounter from people like who are actually been doing crazy stuff, they start from 9th standard, 10th standard. So how it's been journey for you?
So my introduction to coding was through process of elimination. Basically, I was in high school. We had choice of 4 subjects. I'm not good at arts, eliminated. I don't know how much I could have learned in economics, eliminated. We had a subject called technical drawing, but our school had 6 floors and we had to climb all 6 floors with a briefcase. Not doing that. So the only choice I was left with was, computer programming. And we had Java, which is funny. That's the language that I first ever learned. And it's a language that I hate the most now. Like, I would not interview at a place which has Java. But that's how I got introduced to it. Very evidently fell in love with it. That was the only thing I was good at that time as well. I'm not very athletic. Since the younger days. I was actually a very healthy kid when I was growing up, so moving in general was difficult for me. So I was, pretty much in love with it, and then I kind of self-taught, different languages. I got in touch with this thing called machine learning. My sister is actually, she's a scientist at a genomics lab, and so I saw her actually, deal with models, and I was very fascinated by how you can actually teach machines to things which usually humans are good at. And I think the rest is, just like history. After that, took engineering and, started learning more. Never went to college, worked at labs, started exploring deeper into AI research. Then realized I wanted to build something more practical. So then, got into startups and yeah.
Interesting story. And by the way, Soham told me that he used to be 100 kg once at point of time, and from then he, like you say, improved a lot. So, how's your current day to day like looks right now? What you do exactly, and how does it shape up at the very end of the day?
So I mean, it's still not changed much. Most of my time goes with coding. I'm at a startup right now. We are trying to build for a very new market. So there's a lot of like thinking involved from product standpoint, research. Obviously, remaining part of my day is like AI is moving at crazy speeds. Every day there is something new that comes up. So I do luckily have time now to actually like read a lot of papers that come out and kind of actually be in touch with what's going on in the industry. Like what's going on with different startups as well and what they're building in general. That's kind of been my fascination for a very long time. I actually care very deeply about businesses, how businesses scale, what made things like bigger companies that we know right now, scale from the days that they were in, because each company that we know right now eventually started with kind of a very new market, right? And then they kind of established and now they're like worth trillions of dollars, billions of dollars. So I do care a lot about like power laws that govern, like businesses in general. And obviously, you have to be in touch with global, like economic conditions and politics and stuff. So that's kind of like my spirit's pretty unorthodox, and yeah.
So Soham Parekh is the kind of generalist who get excited by research as well as the current tech standard, whatever is coming up.
Yeah, 100%. I like both practical sides and then also like, just ties me together with like how research can be, put to production.
But interesting. Like, I guess audience will be excited too. Something good coming out of your hack research and stuff. So, what's your favorite tech stack these days, and why does it excite you?
So, I've been spending a lot of time working on, trying to figure out like GPU optimization and stuff. So, very recently, like I've just been fascinated with how you make GPUs communicate, with like parallel training and things like that. I've also been going deeper into systems programming. So, I've tried learning Rust 3 times and never got to use it. This is my 4th time.
Oh.
So let's see it go somewhere. But that's something that I've been, spending a lot of time in. One thing that I learned with, with kind of how things are going research is I do really like, thinking about models in a slightly different way and what the inherent limitations are from a more application standpoint. So my favorite tech stack has been mostly around not LLMs and innovation or LLMs in general, but also like, infrastructure that people are building to make these LLMs more, like faster at inference, have more, memory, have
more on the post-training side of LLM.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But I mean, rest of it is just everyday programming languages and, like TypeScript and Python and,
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see. Like, since 1 week, you have become unexpectedly famous, or if I put it framely, infamous. So, how has been life since then, since the story blew up?
So, I mean, fun fact is I was not very active on social media.
Yeah.
I'm very camera shy in general. So, Twitter was an account that I had 13 followers that no one really cared. I was not posting. I was more like a consumer, but not very active. And then, within a day, like, it just blew up. So, it's been very overwhelming. Obviously, I don't know how social media works. I don't know what reach is. I actually, funnily enough, did not even know how to retweet. Like, founder from Darwin surgeon actually taught me how to retweet. So a lot of it has been, and you showed me what closed DMs are today, which is obviously, like as naive as it gets. But it's been pretty crazy. There are a lot of people saying different things. So obviously you need to have some filter around what people say and at the same time, like acknowledge. So it's also been like a lesson in general on how, like in a fraction of seconds, like, the internet can just scatter you across regional language newspapers and stuff. So it's been pretty crazy, but yeah.
This also drives me, like, I just want to back propagate to your college days. So how were you academically? Like, I'm just curious, didn't you consider dropping out college?
I mean, I was good at studies in general. Like I said, there wasn't much going on in my life. I was not very athletic or whatever. So, and obviously I took computer science. I was interested in it. The thing is, typical Indian society laws, like, you want to do some sort of graduation, parents tell you after that your life is sorted and then you go to grad school. So grad school is actually something that I did apply to and never went. One, like during the first application period, like there was COVID, so I deferred. And then I had some family issues, so I couldn't eventually make it. I did try enrolling into an online master's, but then, I was working at a startup at that time, and making time for, that company and like grad school was also not a thing. And then also realized there wasn't much transitivity either. But I did consider it, but I never was forced to go to college. Luckily, my teachers were and professors at college were very supportive. They knew that what I was doing on the side was like open source and research. So, like they were very supportive. They managed attendance and all, which is pretty crazy from the college I come in, if people from my college know. Yeah.
I guess this is pretty much experiments with all colleges based in India.
Yeah.
And everyone, I guess, looks for better opportunities abroad. So you have aced numerical, technical, number of technical interviews, you said. And how did you develop your problem-solving skills to the level? Any particular resource or practices you used to do in your college days or after college? Yeah.
So, I really like building things. So I always had a week where I would work on something. Weekends was a lot of like hackathons and stuff. The idea was not to win, but more to like create a pressure that within 24 hours you have to build something. So you don't have time to over-engineer. You don't like think, okay, I want to make this perfect. You just want to ship something that is something that you can show to people. So there's a lot of my time spent. I also actually contributed a lot to open source. Some really cool projects. I was at Wikimedia Foundation, which is, backing the whole Wikipedia. I contributed to some really cool projects with the Oculus team at Meta. Funnily enough, we built one of the first open source implementations of using your hands as controllers in a 3D space. So that was a very new thing because I was not into AR, VR, and from that to like how it's just matrix multiplication and some libraries like 3JS and stuff.
I'm just curious, are you a serious kernel developer or something?
I'm not a kernel developer, but it's always fascinated me like what lower level primitives are. Like if we think about AI as an abstraction, right? Like what's happening right now is as people use more AI, they actually are kind of living at an abstraction layer where maybe people are getting less and less familiar with what actually the programming languages do. If you think about it, internet is also pretty crazy. It's come out very recently. So there is this batch of people that know all the details around, low level operating systems, like all syscalls, they've built, crazy layers on top of internet protocols. And these people are still alive, right? Some of them are still between us. But we now live in an abstraction where we are at a higher level and we just don't know what's underneath it, right? Yeah. Unless you actually dig deep. So it's kind of been very fascinating to me that, like there is so much to explore and there is so much, like very cliche take, like one of the, like I used to watch a lot of anime growing up. One of my favorite characters was this character called Orochimaru from Naruto.
Oh.
And if you read about him, the one cool thing I liked about him is he wanted to become immortal because he thought that one lifespan is not enough to know everything in the world.
Exactly.
Right? I think it's the same with computer science as well. Like there's so much to know and there's so little time.
Are you one of the guys who tries to look up the system as a black box and start playing around it, hack around it, and develop an intuition to understand the whole picture about it?
I think that's been most of the go-to skills because you can make a guess of how system works internally, and then you can actually like devise, how good your guess was once you actually like understand some of these systems. With, like a lot of research that I was doing, honestly, we did not know what models were doing underneath. We just made it like an estimated guess that, okay, this is what they do. And that's actually been true with all sorts of, layers within computer science, right? Like with a programming language, like you have a high level understanding, but you don't really know deep down, how the interpreter works.
Yeah.
What's the like parser doing. You don't think about it deeply. But there are instances where, like high performance systems, you have to think about, minute details, like a byte makes a difference, a bit makes a difference, right? So at that point in time, you dive deeper. But in most cases, if you want to iterate fast, you just think of it as a tool. Like when you're driving a car, you just know how to drive a car, but you don't have to learn about what's building it, right?
Yeah.
But then if you're like passionate about it, you'll break it down. That's how I see everything else.
Pretty interesting journey, man. Like you are a self-taught developer, you say, or self-taught journalist, you say. So what mistakes did you initially make, or how would you advise beginners to avoid them? Because I guess a lot of audience here is in college. They're just starting out, figuring out things and expecting something will come up and well. So how this has been for you? Like since you have also been a part of the journey, so how it turned out to be at the very end? Yeah.
I think the best way to learn is by doing. And the things that I've learned are at much deeper scale by just experimenting and trying out. there is a very common pattern of tutorial hells. It's very generic. Everyone faces this. I've faced it too. Like what I've learned also from interviews, right? It scales. Like you eventually lose fear of doing something if you've done it long enough. Like people get nervous, but the thing is like as you practice more, you develop the skill, right?
Yeah.
So there is a way where, if you do something more enough number of times, I think Karpati has this, crazy
10,000
10,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
So if you practice something consistently over a period of time, doesn't have to be, 3 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours a day, like even if it's like 1 hour a day, as long as you're consistent with it, it eventually scales. So I guess two things I would say is, just like keep doing new things rather than going to tutorial and never touching it. Just keep building things. And then the second thing that I would also like probably say is that, it's much easier to keep smaller targets and achieve them than do something ambitious. Like, in a week I will learn everything about GPU programming. Not going to happen, right? You want to build that over a period of time, also stays with you longer term as well. Rather than, you just like shortcut it. That's how I learned Rust 4 times, never worked. So, 3 times, 4 is now. So I'm trying to take a different approach now, but I never practiced, so I never learned. So,
Man, it reminds me of a podcast I recently did with Token Bender, and he was too like very practical about if you're working around things not working, just go back, see what's not working, move forward. So like you're just backpacking to the steps that's not working for you, and see like if it doesn't work, switch to another thing. So this is I guess very practical thing, and it really pushes you to an extent that you really like to start doing things what actually excites you.
100%. Also, one thing that, I've learned from gym is that once you actually get into those struggle repetitions is when it starts counting, right? It's actually the same with anything that you learn, that's difficult. Once it actually gets difficult, if you quit at that point, it's not going to work. Math gets difficult with, deep learning. You don't quit at that point.
Yeah.
You keep diving deeper because that's the portion where, you differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd.
Interesting. Let's get back to last week. So can you walk through the moment you first realized the story was going viral? What was your very immediate reaction? And I'm also curious about how your family reacted to it. Did any part of you feel relieved that everything is being finally came out or what?
Yeah, so basically, not taking names, but I had interviewed with a founder in a company, and obviously, it was all conditioned, like they wanted me to be in person, did not materialize. And then one fine day, it was end of the week, I think, I was wrapping up with my work for the next day. I work, pretty much all the time. So it was in the morning, like early in the morning. I got a message in my iMessage, which is screenshot of the tweet that Suhail posted, and then just good luck below it. And that's it. And that's how I came to know that, someone has posted about me on Twitter. I was not on Twitter, like I said, so there was no other way for me to get back. Also, it takes time for things to distribute.
No.
And then my initial reaction was, I don't know Twitter. Maybe I should just keep quiet. So obviously I was taken aback. I was like, why is like what happened suddenly? But I did not react to it. I was obviously bothered by it, but like I said, I don't understand social media. So I just spoke to a friend of mine. I asked him, he's like a founder as well. And was like, this is what has happened. He's like, just ignore it, it'll subside down, which little did I know did not. Right. So yeah.
And yeah, like this has happened to you, and I'm curious about what exactly was the reaction of people around you, and your friends, family, and stuff.
So my people who are close to me, they've seen me work crazy hours.
Yeah.
I have destroyed a lot of relationships with them too, which I'm not proud, which is, one thing that I would advise anyone getting into this, like relationships do matter, which I realize now because when I was going through all of this, at the end of the day, the people that I had around me were essentially people that I took for granted while, working so much. So, they were very supportive. Like I said, they've seen me work, insanely hard, pretty much be at home every day. I have not taken a vacation in like good 2 to 3 years. I had a lot of health issues. I was still working. But the crazy part is I've made a lot of impromptu trips to US. Like, within an afternoon, I would realize that I have to take a flight the same night. It's like a 17-hour flight, and the very next day I would show up in the office. So that's how crazy life has been. People around me don't know when someone's going to fly out, when he's in town, when he's not. Because with startups, like things move in a day, right? So like their reaction was pretty positive because some of the statements being used against me were pretty strong, and I don't think that I was a fraud or scam, whatever people are calling me. So, obviously their take on it was very positive because they've seen me through all this.
Interesting. So with this all Twitter people talking about you, what's the biggest misconception people have about your story or your intentions?
So, I think this topic is very sensationalized for a lot of reasons, they're going around in the times we live in. And people have exaggerated a lot of claims. The very first claim is I was working at 20 companies at one time, which is obviously false. In my lifetime, I think I might have worked in 20 companies, maybe not 20 even, like lesser, because I was doing work trials for some of them.
Yeah.
So obviously when this came out, a lot of people started posting more screenshots of emails with email IDs which were not mine. Some people just claimed that, I have interviewed with them and they let me go. And then when I comment under the tweet, like, I don't remember working for you, they just delete the tweet. So a lot of people started to jump on the bandwagon to fake post things. And I think that initially was bothering me a lot because there was some truth, but a lot of lies around what people were posting and the intentions around it and all. So that was obviously one thing. Some crazy statistic was someone said I hired a dev shop, which I would love to know, like, who the interns were. I posted about it. People know about it. I've lived with some of these founders I've worked with. So, they've seen me, be in the office. Like I said, I have sleep issues, so I don't sleep much. So they've actually made a bet sometimes, like, we'll see Soham sleeps or not today, like something like that as a joke. But so I had no dev shop. I was, doing this on my own, working, with no external tooling or no proxy or whatever. I think the third one, which is also a little bit interesting, is faked CV. Again, I don't know how this is true because all the, CVs that are going around, the timelines and everything are accurate. These companies I've worked at, the founders have come and said I've worked for them. Some people have faked GitHub contributions and you don't see me in my contributions on GitHub. Fun fact is, a lot of contributions I did were not on GitHub. Wikimedia Foundation does not use GitHub, it uses Gerrit, which, is a different version control system. And my code there is publicly accessible. I've cited this code in my CV. A lot of my, recent contributions are open source. And rest of it are in private repositories. Like, I'm happy to show it to someone, but like, how do I, make private repository contributions public? That's not in my hands. And regardless of the situation, even if I would have faked, startups, I would imagine these are like extremely high bar engineering companies, and they have extremely high filters on how to get people in, through work trials where you actually spend time working with them, take home assignment. It's not like your DSA. I've been candid about this. If it was data structures and algorithms, I know my data structures well, but I would have bombed, like lead code type questions, because that's not something I actively spend time doing, every day in my life. So, I did well in these systems. I actually deeply cared about the business model. Like I said, I care about market segments and how a company is made, what is the underlying cause. I was very generative in a lot of these companies. And so, like, that's also like a interesting, segment that has come into being. And then I think the funniest thing I found about all of this is, like, people calling scam fraud. To me, a person who's, I am not advocating what I've done. Obviously, like, I've spoken about this in, today as well. Like, one of the regrets I have is not being open about working at multiple places. And I think if I was candid with the founders, they would have understood my side of the situation, or they would have recommended ways where I could have come out of the situation, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that is false to it is, a lot of these companies, I have done a lot of meaningful work. Antimetal, we were in Brinks during 2 of our launches. In one of the launches, the very first launch, we were at an offsite, and this guy, where we hired, he basically backed out a week before the launch. And there was no one else to do our front end. And we had marketing, TechCrunch article, everything planned. And we were at an offsite in Austin. I canceled my flight back to India, like postponed it, went back to Phoenix with the founders, was there for 3 days. We were awake the entire night, and we made the launch happen. The second time, AWS made a policy change. We had to change our product. Within a weekend, we built a product, and the very next week, we had 30 users, no dashboard, right? And that became their offering. And then also when I left, I'm very good friends with the founders. I left with this notion of idea of, this is what we should be doing next. They just gotten into AI grant. we spend a lot of time thinking about what the future should be. So I've been very generative in these companies. I've, provided more than engineering. So, when people say, like this person did not deliver or stuff, obviously, can I say that I gave any company 100%? No, because I was dividing my time, right? So even if I say I gave each company my all, it's not really 100% because if I was giving 100%, I'd be at one company, right? But to say that I've not done meaningful contributions and I'm a fraud, and a lot of these places, by the way, where, I felt that I could not deliver, someone posted a screenshot of me, saying that, hey, there's this drone thing, which by the way did happen. That company I haven't even invoiced. Like I've put this on Twitter, the founder has agreed that I never filed, invoice. So I don't know what, why people are claiming that I'm a fraud, because fraud would be if I charge for something that I did not do, which, I did a lot of meaningful work for these companies at. And then, yeah, like I think that's kind of the main, allegations that at least I've seen, in my mind that has come across.
There is narrative which is being floating out for quite some time that you are working for an organization and at the same meantime, the day they tracked your GitHub activity, you were contributing to some other place or some other organization. So can you just demystify what was it about?
Yeah, so basically I was, I was traveling back from my sister's house and I obviously felt sick because weather changes, my body couldn't keep up, and I have crazy travel schedule. So I had just come to SF, just went to New York, just came back, 6 hours flight to and fro. I felt sick, and like I said, I don't do much. So I was at my, I was at my friend's apartment at that time. Like he had subleased from someone, and I was just sick. I was at home all the day. I don't have much to do. I don't watch TV shows. I don't go out. I'm like at home all day. I had told them that I was sick. So DeepSeek had come out at that time. I was not having much to do. I was also sick. And by the way, these founders I had asked, like, hey, I'm not feeling well. I'm under the weather. Do you want me to come? I don't want to infect anyone. And they said, stay at home. And I told them to push my start date. So it wasn't that I had started. I had pushed my start date to a week after. Like I had interviewed with them on Friday, joined on Monday. I asked, hey, can we push by a week because I'm not feeling well. I wanted to be in best health when I'm onboarding. And meaning I was not getting paid again, so I don't see how it's a total push started. Obviously, like engineering resources are important. So, and the contribution was basically like in my personal, exploration where I was trying to experiment with some prompts with DeepSeek and I was trying to version control them so that I can use them, locally. So, I mean, obviously it was in a private repo. They just tracked my GitHub and they're like, why are you contributing? Which, I mean, I don't know, how they made an allegation. I was working for a different company because I was not. I was sick from there as well because I was actually sick. So that's basically what had happened.
It justifies a lot of false narratives being told about. People also noted that you seem to carefully pick startups with strong potential. Like you were very picky with the startups you are interviewing for or getting into it. So almost as if you had done through the due diligence. What exact criteria did you use to choose these companies, and how do you genuinely believe those startups you choose are more likely to succeed in a better long time? Yeah.
So I mean, I've told about, I'm very passionate about, startups and its markets and, power laws and impacts that companies, especially smaller companies can have in the industry. So each of these companies that I, interviewed at or reached out to was actually something that I had read a lot about for the business model, what scale they can, and all of these companies are very early. So it wasn't like, they were, headed for a large funding round. In fact, a lot of these companies were struggling with, a new market that they were trying to create, or they were trying to do a pivot the very time we joined. So each of these companies had extremely, stressful environments that, they were kind of incubating in. Not all, but most of them did. And I actually cared a lot about the business model. Like I said, even with the interviews, I was very generative. I had a lot of ideas about different teams, different markets, different ways we can, monetize the product, how the company would look like in 6 months, a year. I had thought very deeply about this. So obviously, the main problem with me is that there are things that I like, and if I like, I will do them throughout the day. That's like self-motivated. But if I don't like something, it's very difficult for me to find an adaptation to it. And what I've learned in a startup is you have to get used to both the worlds. Yeah. Because there are instances where you're going to like the work, there are instances you're not going to like the work. But meaningfully, if I am able to see myself delivering in an impact, like, hey, can I be here and build something with what I know?
Yeah.
then that was a company that I would reach out to.
Interesting. How did you organize your day when juggling multiple full-time or founding engineering roles? How was your typical day at your peak workload looks like?
It was pretty uninteresting answer. Like I was sleeping when I was not sleeping. I was working, maybe eating, and like obviously I was doing natural chores that you have to do. But I also sleep very little. Like people around me know me. They know me. They know that I have sleepy. Yeah, I'm a sleep hater. Like I hate sleeping. I've consulted doctors about it. Basically they're like, as long as you're fine, it doesn't matter. So I mean, this was my day to day. Like 7 days a week. Get up. I was working out, but I had surgery, so I had to stop that as well for a while. So I was either working or sleeping. Like that's pretty much all it was. Like there was nothing else.
It was pretty much you were adjusted, or if better say addicted to your routine.
Yeah, and also I mean, like people around me were concerned. Like they were like, what's going on here? Like it's okay. This guy like not sleeping like 3-4 hours. He's at computer all the time.
Yeah.
I was not meeting a lot of friends. Not in touch with a lot of relatives and stuff. So it did definitely come at a cost. But yeah, that's basically what my day to day was.
So people say you knowingly misled startups, multiple startups simultaneously. Why should anyone trust your word or your work ethic going forward?
I mean, I don't think work ethic, again, founders that have lived with me, I've lived with a lot of them personally, for months sometimes. They kind of know that, I've been instances where I've been in office several days in a week. We had a production outage in one of these companies I was working at, and I was with one of the co-founders and another ML engineer, the entire night, like trying to figure out what went wrong. And, we migrated their entire like infrastructure in prem from like external services, saved a lot of money. So what I'm trying to make here is that I have delivered an immense value with people I've worked with. And if you talk to any founder who spent more than 3 months with me, they would say the same thing. Obviously, people that we had friction with, that we decided to part ways, I had hardly onboarded. Maybe a couple of weeks I would have spent, which is not enough time for you to even like, get to know each other. And obviously, at that point in time, they come to know you're working at multiple places. They want exclusivities, they're not okay with it. So that's kind of the general theme. But in general, what I've learned is, like personal issues aside, like this is something that a founder that I had reached out to apologize had told me that there are 2 types of interests that you incur in life. One is monetary, and then the other one is on integrity. And what I've incurred is interest on integrity, and those interests are longer to pay. So obviously I want to come clean. I think that the best way to do this is to be very public about what I do. Luckily, I have crazy Twitter blowout, which basically means that I'll be very candid about what I'm building in public. I don't want to like make the same mistakes again. I think if I were to take a different, angle at this from the startup lens and, founders, like they are wronged in some way, right? Because these are very small companies and each person has to be all in or all out. Meaning, like at the end of the day, I mean, see, like if you're delivering value, if you're like able to do things and get things done, it doesn't matter. But it is still important that you're candid with them in their situations so that they're not in an assumption. And everyone has situations, right? Like there are right ways to deal with something, there are wrong ways to deal with something. If you are able to come through it, in the right way, then obviously, you're a winner. In my case, I took the wrong path. But I genuinely cared about these companies. I was in good terms with a lot of these founders. So I think all I would say is I have no reason to do the same mistake again. I think everyone has their eyes on me, and it's even more important now than ever that I prove, what I can do.
So just to summarize, like there are 2 buckets of founders. One is in which you have worked for quite some time, maybe 2 or 3 months. And one is like which with the startups you have been working on trial. So the ones which you have been working for quite some time has a lot of good notions and good talks about you. But the people or the startups which you have been in work trial or in a very work with a short time, maybe a week or 2. So they kind of posting ambiguously and showing whatever you have been doing because they have not a pretty good idea about yourself and what's your people's work.
Also, some of these startups that I was doing work trial with, work trial was a part, like I'm not saying all of them were work trials, right? Like some of them are just like onboarded and we just realized, like work trial was a part of interview. Like if you see that interview process, it's 2-3 chats, like technical chats, debrief, and then there's a work trial which is a week. It's a part of the interview. So I don't know how or why being in a work trial and interviewing someone else is like I don't know. I didn't know there was a problem. And then also in some of these places they didn't even pay me. Like like there's one company which quote unquote posted our Soham experience, and again, like I said, people post different things. The crazy part about that is we had a stressful situation some time back with war and everything. This is new to me. I had not lied about it, and they expected me to come to Indonesia on my own cost. And I told them that, hey, I cannot travel. And that too, on the very next day, like Friday, they're like, can you come tomorrow? And I'm like, I can try, but there was, stressful situation here. Like, I don't want to take a flight in that situation and, be somewhere else or even take that risk where I'm, taking a flight. So I was candid with them about it. I had no idea about them. And I think they just like posted some screenshots and then just manipulated the whole situation to get some, fame out of what was going on, which, like I said, I'm not saying everyone did that. There are people who, came out with the truth, and I am very sorry for what I've done, right? But it's these people with integrity that start posting lies, which actually starts bothering you, because, what's wrong here, right?
Yeah. Also, one thing people want to know about, did you use specific AI tools? Like people are using interactive IDs like cursor and stuff and all to kind of multiply their productivity and stuff. So how you have been working around this to hack and manage context switching between different startup, if that is the case?
So I was working at some of these places before GPD was a thing. Like, when even GitHub Copilot had come out. A lot of it was my individual merit. And it's very funny, but if you actually spend time with me coding, you'll see that I am a very selective user of the way I use AI. I am a big believer. Obviously, I have spent a lot of time thinking about code generation and things like that, because it was always amusing to me that if you train models first on learning to code, they perform better.
Yeah.
So that's been a thing I care about. So it's obviously, I'm a proponent of these tools, but I'm a very selective user, because what I do end up seeing a lot happen as well is like people don't know what code the AI has written and they end up in like bugs and stuff. And to me, like every code that I ship is like a stamp on, hey, this is what I have said that is good, right? Like then I cannot make excuses that, Cursor wrote it, I'm sorry for that. So truth is, I do use these tools, but they don't add as much of a productivity gain. If at all, they help me think faster. But in terms of my total developer time, I think it's still the same, because the time that I'm saving from not having, obviously boilerplate code, they help a lot. Yeah. But the time that I'm saving from having to write code that I would have otherwise written, I am spending in like reviewing it and then trying to understand what it wrote. So, and then prompt it and, make it align in the right direction. So, I think that's been kind of like that's how I use these tools. But obviously, with thinking and with learning new languages that I don't know or something like that, these are like amazing tools, but they don't really add much to what I do day to day. Like it's just a part of the tooling, like any other tool is.
So like you have been, you are not a true like a very likely user of these AI tools. So I'm just curious, did you try to interview for frontier labs as well, like ChatGPT, OpenAI or DeepMind stuff, and how it's been for you? Yeah,
I did actually. Way early after my undergrad, basically I did try interviewing for frontier labs. I actually cleared a lot of rounds for OpenAI, but then immigration issues. I was in India at that time, and I had just missed, I think, the H1B line or something. Like the time frame they filed in February, it was in April. So that's one thing. I don't know if you count Synthesia as a frontier lab, but they do really good research. And, I did interview them. I was not on the research, I was on the product side, but it was still fascinating. They're making deep fakes and, I think it's also one of the best engineering cultures I've seen. One of the best. There are, a lot of companies I work, they have awesome cultures. And, I would say like the funny part is a lot of these companies are very research forward. So they were in a way like labs, they're just not frontier because they don't have that much scale and funding. But with the amount of funding they had, like, in the constraint, they were doing amazing work, like Sync and all, they were doing pretty crazy research. We had some researchers from India as well. So it was interesting working for them as well.
So if visa wasn't a concern, we may have seen Soham Parekh working in OpenAI and stuff.
I don't know, maybe in the API team. That's yeah.
Interesting. How did you handle technical conflicts of interest, like the similar problems or kind of MVPs you're solving for multiple companies and being the competitive ideas between two companies? How you work around that? Like people have assumption that you may have transferred the MVPs like juggling between two different ecosystems. Yeah.
So I have never sold or conflicted or violated any IP laws. I was very strict about it. Like I said, I cared about these companies, whether I was a part of them or not. I cared about their success, and I've been very ethical about it. And also with that same definition, like I was not at any two companies that were doing, they were like direct competitors to each other because, like I said, while applying to these places, I cared about the business. So if I was at two places which were competing with each other, then that would conflate the whole idea, right? Like, why are you making bets at two companies? Like, one has to succeed, right, if they're in the same industry. So I was never at two places which were in direct conflicts with each other at the same time as well. And I think in general with, a lot of open source work I did, a lot of research I did, what I've seen is there's a lot of transitivity between things that you learn, like across the places. Like, there are things that you learn in one place you can apply somewhere else. I'm not saying that the only way to do this is multiple jobs. Like you can do projects, you can do open source, you can do research on your free time. But there is definitely things that you should do outside work because it helps you build better transitivity into what you're doing day to day. A lot of my MVPs have been kind of like experimental thoughts that I had, which we would just like some of these companies would do like hack weeks.
Yeah.
Meaning once every offsite, like people would allocate 1 week to hack on anything, and that's a way for you to build MVPs. And some of these, like Command Bar was a company that was doing this, and 2 hackathons we had one. The first one was crazy. We had at that time like transcribing YouTube videos and searching through them was a pretty big deal. Now it's like commonplace. So that's one of the MVPs we built there. We built a bar for like desktop applications and stuff. So like Raycast, but for desktop, and it was pretty crazy. Even at Sync, I built a POC for real-time lip syncing. It was a POC we did in like a hackathon that I was judging at Purdue. So it was all crazy. Like like these were like matter of weeks, and we just spin up. I was also working on some like like other primitives as well. So yeah.
Interesting journey, man. Like you have been a part of a very core team of startups or founders you have been working with. So did you form any genuine friendship or professional relationships during your multi-job period, or did secrecy isolate your complete identity have been justified? Yeah.
It's actually been in fact opposite. Like because I was spending so much time at these places, the only people I would talk to are these people. So I mean, sounds a little bit conflicting. Why would I not be honest with them if this was the case? Personally, that was more like an embarrassment, and that's how I am as a person. Like, I like to keep it light. I like to make people think that I'm happy even if I'm struggling internally, which I've realized is not a good thing to do, at least with people you're close with. But a lot of these, a lot of the founders of these places are like very close to me. They're like, my best friends. Sanjit, Darwin, he's my best friend. If we, Shreyas, Matt from Antimetal, Praddy, he's been my model, like both as a person, as an individual, but also, when all of this happened, the first person I went to is Praddy, basically, and, Manan. Like I have all founders from Sync as well, like, founders from Command Bar, a lot of engineers from Synthesia were one, all there, like, they're pretty close friends of mine. Whatever happened outside that, like, I don't think as a person, I was the way I was, and I've spent like a lot of meaningful time. It's kind of funny if I take screenshots of conversations I've had with these people, it's just crazy. Like it can be like a meme thread in itself. Like, I've had extremely good relationships with them. So I have built a lot of meaningful relationships.
Pretty interesting. And I guess if you're a part of such an ecosystem where people are really supportive and you have been working for some time, you develop that mutual understanding in each other. Also, like I got this question that how did you handle onboarding at multiple startups at once? Like most teams take a week just to get your dev access. Yeah.
So I mean, like was very rare when I was onboarding at two places at the same time. And like almost like very similar to the, like I think the main problem is when people apply to places, they've not used the product enough. Yeah. So you don't know what capabilities it. Like you have to be a consumer to be able to invest. Like I cannot say that I'm not, if the company has a product. If they don't, then it's good because you're starting from a fresh slate, which was case with some of these places. But in other places, then you have to be a user and you have to understand what the company does and what primitives they have, what issues they have. Like I said, have core understanding of the business, because then code becomes easier. You can like tie the dots, right? So onboarding for me was easier because, I mean, not always. In some places you have tooling and setup and, like you wait for laptop and stuff. So there are things like these that come up, but there are better ways where, you can like navigate the space. Like if you understand the product well, tying it to code is not very difficult.
Given your experience in such an ecosystem, would you ever recommend someone else take the path of juggling or working around multiple startup roles simultaneously, even temporarily? Why or why not?
So one thing that I came to know is a lot of people do this, but they're candid about, that they're working at multiple places. And the thing that I should have done is obviously first come clean and told them that, hey, this is my situation. I have been candid about this as well in the podcast. Like I was in some, like I had some financial situations which I did not talk to people about. I kept it with myself and it ate me up. And then I took bad decisions, which if I would have shared with people around me, like I said, they would have helped, come up with better solutions of getting out of it, right? Like this is not the only path. But like at the end of the day, it's individuals, it's a decision. Like I feel like if you're at a startup, it requires a lot of effort and it requires a lot of brain power to actually be at multiple places, and it definitely comes with a cost, right? Like there is cost on health, there is cost on, like relationships, and also those things are important, which I'm realizing later now than, at that point in time. So there's nothing against it if you're like, mistake I made was not being candid about it. And if you're able to be candid about it, I, highly recommend, much easier than, hiding it from anyone. And if you're able to get the work done, and if people are okay with it and they don't feel violated with it, then I don't think it's wrong. It starts becoming wrong when you try to bite more than what you can chew, which I've also been in that situations as well.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes unfair to everyone, right? And then you're responsible for it, which in my case, in some cases I was. So that's the way I look at it. There is nothing unethical if you are clean about it, because turns out a lot of people do it anyway. And it just creates much more trust, right? Like people can be predictable. Then if you're like not able to do something, like at least, like you can...
At least you're showing your own compatibility or adaptability to
rather than it being a skill judgment or, a thing on like, hey, this person is not a good engineer, whatever. But reality is you're like at, 5. I was on at 5, but like 3 places or whatever.
Also, how you managed to survive the background checks? So more importantly, how did companies not find it suspicious that you always had like exactly 1 year of experience in all of the previous companies on the resume? So people were talking about this as well.
So I don't know how background checks work in general, but like I said, the filter that they had was interviews. I did really well with them. And some of these places that I worked at, they had very good references for me. And most of the other places were like logistical details, company struggling with revenue or something like that, which was the early ones before I started working in multiple places. So in general, like, I don't think, obviously, people do get concerned if you have like a year at a place or something, and you should be longer term in places. It's important with startup because you have, you grow with the company and team and things like that. But in any environment, like things are unpredictable. In my case, like, I again don't know what the internal processes these places have. And it was also not my, I did not try actively to misalign them, by giving fake references or whatever. I was candid with the references that I gave. And some people did do background checks, and like there was one company that I was doing work trial with, they did background check, and then they're like, hey, we've come to know that you worked at multiple places, and in general we wouldn't have mind if you would have told us to us before, but we're at a state where we are a very small team. There's only one person in team, so is a founding engineer. And so, like there have been instances like this. It's not that that's not been the case.
Interesting. Also, like you have been part of different ecosystems working for companies based in different parts of the world. So what did you experience teach you about the culture of Valley versus the startup ecosystem based in India?
So I think one thing that I've found very interesting about startups in Silicon Valley are, like I said, they have high capacity for risk, meaning, they are willing to take bets longer term.
Yeah.
Which I think I'm seeing the culture now in India, to be candid. Like Indian startups earlier were like risk averse. They would try tested markets, like, they would replicate something that worked in American market, started in India, or some other country and started in India. That's how like a lot of theme in the Indian startup ecosystem worked. And I think that's navigating now. Obviously I was here, I saw some of the, robotic tools we have and stuff. So there's, in general, like pretty impressed, right? Like I did not know this exists in India. So there's obviously things that are happening in India. There's just less awareness about, what capabilities people have being in India and, what opportunities they have and what they can build and the support, the Indian network that they have. So I think the main difference has just been that, like startups in the Silicon Valley marketplace are much more willing to take risk and make longer bets, whereas in India, that's a little bit constrained. And maybe that is just my lack of knowledge around the space in India. But other than that, I think there are phenomenal engineers in India, right? Like Bangalore is full of them. I've met so many of them today. And I think in general, like a lot of engineers from some of these places were also Indian researchers, and they were crazy people, right? Like they were cracked, 10x, 100x researchers. Some you introduced as well.
Yeah.
So in general, I'm pretty bullish in where we're headed. I think it's just if we continue to make stronger bets in the spaces we are in, I think it can pan out really well.
Pretty interesting. How do you see this agentic space being rolling out, being in Valley or India? Like people are actually building around agent and stuff. So what are your thoughts on this? Like we see tens or hundreds of startups or products coming out on Product Hunt. This is just on agentic space or deep research and stuff. Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting paradigm in general. Indian marketplace, like are you specifically talking about Indian marketplace or like in general? Like
You can talk about both. Yeah.
Okay. So like Indian marketplace is interesting because there's access to cheap labor, whatever the facts are. And it's much difficult in my view to have these companies scale with India without having, like there is a dilemma, right? Like India is a very different marketplace than America is because we are 1 billion of us, which is actually an opportunity too, because if you tap into like 10%, like you are already having a volume, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it in that way. And then you don't have to keep your, margins that high. You can still be a very profitable company and still, not profitable, but like you can be a profitable company, but, still not like, drain people out from the money. But I think the thing with Indian marketplace is also that it's very difficult to create loyalty to a brand, right? Like especially with, I think maybe with engineers it's easier because once you stick to a tool, you feel married to it. You spend hours configuring it, so it's difficult for engineers to shift or switch very easily, right? Maybe with AI it's changing because every day there's a new tool. But it's interesting to see if India can grow in a direction where more people are willing to be used to this idea that, a lot of my manual work can be done in a much more efficient way by an agent or a system. I think the biggest dilemma in general that people have is, hey, it's going to take my job or it's going to replace me. And if you think deeply about it, that's not exactly true, right? Like a lot of takes have been made about like engineers getting replaced with, tools like Cursor and Claude. But if you have played around with these tools and have spent sufficient time, it's even more relevant than before to actually know what it is writing, right? Meaning engineering is relevant even more than before. It's just the friction has reduced, right? So barrier to entry in the industry has reduced, which is good for any industry, right? Yeah. Because then more people can build, more people can innovate, things can be built faster. Like we as humanity are the net positive.
Interesting.
So I'm pretty bullish in the space. I think it can go in a lot of positive directions and the net outcome can be positive. It's just the people have to be willing to adapt and not see it as a competition, but more as, an auxiliary part of themselves, like any other tool that they've been using in the day-to-day.
Pretty interesting. On the same note, we are building Bindi AI from Bangalore for billions of people around the world. It's basically cursor for your apps. Don't juggle between multiple apps. Not open any tab. Just prompt your query and get the work done. We have, I guess, over hundreds plus of pages right now. And yeah, good. It's been an interesting story for the Bindi, how it's being rolling out, and we have pretty interesting news coming up soon. But yeah, like I guess this agentic space is a bit cluttered in the sense like shipping is being really easy these days. But yeah, how optimized launches can we make in terms of like recently we launched backrooms, you say you're sharing your context, making your persona and doing background tasks. So looking in a direction that can actually feel you agentic and a lot of productivity hacks as well. So any thoughts you have about if you have used Bindi AI and if you have any like what more it could be in the next few years maybe?
Yeah, so I see like, people have different categories of tasks, right? Like tasks where you require like direct feedback, like tasks which are somewhat trigger based, but they are still, like one session. And then there are these long running tasks which, you may or may not want to do in a repeated schedule. That includes, things like deep search and things like that, right? So I think the way I see these systems is obviously, there's one spectrum where things that you do manually, like doing some research, writing into an Excel sheet, things like that, like you would have to spend man hours doing that. It also can be an interface where there are some tools that you should not care about, but you have to, right? Like with integrations, you can reduce that barrier to entry, right? And make it very easily accessible to people. And I think the third and very interesting take here is like it just reduces your ability to actually, like your ability to expand on things that you can do, right? Like if you cannot like code, like if you've used, even OpenAI or anything similar, it will sometimes, like if you ask it to compress a PDF, it will create a code for you, it will run your input against it and it will give you a compressed output. Meaning there are tasks like these which are not governed by a naive agent, right? Which is PDF do this. It's understanding on the fly that, okay, this particular task I can solve by writing a code on the fly. So it's very interesting because you as a human would do the same, right? You either use an online off-the-shelf tool, go and upload the PDF and get a compressed output. If you're an engineer, you just build a compressed system. Same goes for image compression, same goes for data analytics. So like you as a human, you don't have to know XYZ to be able to do something like this. And I think that's truly where these things shine, especially when they're like long context running and if you can like, they're like long running and if you can have some recurrence on top of it, like they start becoming very useful. So it is definitely an interesting.
I'm tweaking, you are a really good product person. So which of the products or startups that you worked on, like which excited you most from a technical or impact perspective of you?
Because I'm not saying this because I'm working here right now, but Darwin's been some of the craziest things we've worked on. Because like I said, we're trying to create a new market. And creating a new market is not very easy, right? You have to have some understanding about the space that is adjacent but not the same. And some of the systems you've built in-house around workflow orchestration and, actually like being able to host in models in-house, like create an abstraction around GPUs and stuff. It's been kind of like insane because these are not solved problems. These are problems that we have to come up, on the fly. Some architectures, experiences on the user side, like these have been very generative. And I, in general, like I'm very excited about what we're building, but again, like time will tell once we launch. But there was one, like interesting thing that I actually worked on open source, not like a company. But like I said, it was like this, AR, VR for web. And the reason it was very interesting is because I realized a lot of graphics is just, a fine transformations and stuff, which is also true for a lot of like, LLMs and like that's essentially what they are, right? They're like matrix affine transformation. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of transitivity I was able to find between the two cases where, there's a rotation happening in the space because, you're like multiplying, like complex number multiplication anyway. So it's very interesting. Like computer science is very, all encompassing. Like you can take idea from one place and apply it to another, and it may or may not apply. But if it does, it's kind of fascinating. It's like it creates magic. So
Cool. I recall your TBPN interview as well. You said about financial aspect and building aspect, like you really like to build. So though it may be the case that both alternatives complete each other, because at one point of time you were more resisting or I'm just working on to better my financial aspects, but also you were saying that I'm just working because I like to build. So what's the scenario for that?
So what I meant to say was, I was in a, stressful financial situation, and I'm very good at building. Like that is what I like to do, and luckily it pays decently well. So the way I thought about, like obviously it was the wrong way, but the way I thought about getting out of that was basically, hey, if I can work at multiple places, I can basically spend more hours doing what I like to do. And it's easier for me to invest hours into something that I like to do, right? And then it also helps with my financial situation, because I don't have anything else to do outside of, just work, right? And so this is how I thought about this issue. Like, hey, I am in this situation. I have to come out of it. I like building. What if I, just do more of it? Because if I do more of it, I maybe will be able to alleviate the situation, which by the way, like I did not, but that's how I thought about it. And obviously, like I said, there's not a right way to think about it in general, because, like there is this whole aspect of you telling people about it, right?
Yeah.
But also before that, like I should have spoken to people. My biggest fault was not talking to people and not telling them, when I did make the decision. So I hope I can learn from this, but yeah.
Looking inwards, did your self-perception changes after all this unfolded? How did you define your identity today?
I mean, it's not changed much, to be honest. Like, I think people can lie about, and things, and there's some truth obviously about it. People can have different opinions on it. The core truth has been, I did do work where I did, and what people cannot take away from me is like core skill set. Like, that's going to be with me. I care about this. The good thing that did come out of this is I've got more time to like actually learn about things that I wanted to for a very long time, but was not able to. So in general, I don't think it's changed perception about myself in terms of what I can do or can get done, because people who, like I said, know me sufficiently for long enough, like I don't know everything, right? Like there's a lot I have to learn, and, I have that drive, so, I can continue doing that. But I think the lesson that it has taught me is that, same on the talks about like, interest on integrity, right? Like that's one thing that I don't want to compromise going forward. No matter what situation I'm in, I think it's much easier to just call out what it is and then just, go ahead with it rather than take a wrong path.
That makes pretty much sense. Some might argue you permanently damaged the reputation of remote workers and Indian engineers seeking opportunities abroad. What do you think about the negative stereotypes this has reinforced?
I don't think that is really, again, I don't know statistics. I'm not on social media. I don't know what general, perception of public is. But I don't think that should be true, because, like if you can get work done, like I said, if you're good at what you do, it doesn't matter, right? I think the good thing about being remote is that it allows you to hire talent from places which you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And there are a lot of people who have extremely high integrity, at least, there are people I know who are, like they've been extremely diligent about what they do despite being remote. And that's been true with me as well. Like I was working, right? I was delivering at a lot of these places. So as long as things get done, I think people should be okay with it. The main important part is like to have the truth, in front of you. But I don't think I don't think there is a perception that people should have against remote work or anything in general. Obviously, I'm realizing like in person is better because you get to spend time with people. But yeah, I think, if you're able to get things done and if you can keep integrity, I don't think you should not hire someone remote, especially if they're good.
seems like you are really workaholic and you sufficiently enjoy it as well. So what's one surprising technical insight or innovation idea you discovered during your chaotic work experience so far that you think startups are completely missing? Or one point that you have work across multiple ecosystems and you think like what that one thing, particular thing can be improved at certain point of time. Yeah.
So I think there is a very positive balance and equilibrium that you have to keep with tech debt.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people like to say that if you're fixing your tech debt and not, you're not building right. I don't think that's fully true. I think there's a way where you can find middle ground, because if you incur tech debt extremely high, which with vibe coding is becoming extremely common, that people don't know what code they've written. And I'm not generalizing. I'm just saying mostly people don't know. At least when I vibe code, sometimes I don't know what it's doing, right? So I have to check it multiple times. So I think if you incur a lot of tech debt, you end up like in a situation where you don't have connectivity with your own product.
Yeah.
Right. And the amount of time you save in the beginning, you end up like paying dividends later down the line. So if you're in a situation where you're fighting tech debt before pre-market fit, whatever, obviously, do whatever is able to get you feedback the fastest, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. Like you can make the perfect sculpture, but if no one sees it, like who knows it's made, right? But on the other spectrum, like you can make a sculpture, but if it rains, it should not like melt, right? So I think there is a way you can find a positive balance between the two. At least your core pieces you should still keep around, but other pieces you should, kind of like, feel free to like build in a breakable way. But there's obviously cost to, you have to ship fast, and I think momentum is at the end like longer term achievable. But I think this is something that people should try to like balance out, because otherwise it just becomes a mess that everyone is afraid to touch. And in my experience, and there's a lot of research around like degradation of software and things like that.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the scientist who spent doing that. Software will degrade over a period of time, and if it starts on a crazy, like foundation, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is real for right. If you had unlimited resources today, what kind of tech product would you personally want to build from scratch? Or if you have any idea, like what you really want to build at some point of time?
So, I mean, there are two things. The first thing is, I've been public about this. I kind of find prompt engineering interesting, because it took us from like making broken queries on Google to, I posted about this on Twitter as well, to like, you have to explain everything to an LLM.
Yeah.
And I feel there is a way where you can create like a higher abstraction where people don't have to, like, there are different ways, right? Like you can ask a stronger LLM to expand the prompt for you. There are a lot of ways to do this, but I feel it's an interesting area. I don't know if it's possible or not. We'll see what happens. But I think there's a higher level abstraction that can sit directly on top of LLMs where, you don't have to, maybe through a tooling or maybe through an interface where you don't have to worry about, like actually like engineering your prompts as much. It's kind of like more implicitly done or abstract away from the user. The other thing I've been thinking about a lot is like memory, with especially agentic systems that are growing up. I am exploring, something in this direction as well. I've been very excited about the space as well. I think like as we have agents that are able to do a lot of long running tasks and, multiple of them, and there's a fleet, what gets very important is, representation of memory. How do you, like compress it? How do you represent it? What's the architecture? Is it hierarchical? Is it, like uniform, like directional? So I think these are things that I'm excited about. But yeah, also like I'm curious to see how GPU optimization, things like that evolve. And, there's obviously a lot of compute cost to running AI, and there's a lot of environmental implications. And we just like run a query, but we're not like actually, witnessing what's happening behind the scenes, right? With all the compute that goes in. So I hope that there's a way where we can run models in a much more efficient manner so that, we can actually have intelligent systems that are not, killing us basically.
Interesting. Like this moonlighting thing, if these actions become a standard practice, how could any company sustainably function or maintain trust among its team members? Suppose you be a CEO of the company. And so if these actions become a norm or natural, so how would you actually react or proact towards it? Yeah.
See, like, I think organizations have to be more meritocratic, right? Is this person getting things done? If they are, so, like, you can make an argument that there are always more things to get done, right? Like, if you wrap up with this, do something else. But there has to be, like, I think, like, implicit incentive in people, which some people do have, like, I personally don't care if I have to work the entire day, right? Like, if I had an ideal situation where there was infinite money, I would do that all the time, right? The thing here is, like, like, if you're meritocratic, then it shouldn't matter to you. Like, as long as things are getting done, like, it shouldn't matter. But obviously, if they're not getting done, then that starts becoming a problem. But you have to, like, figure out a balance, because it's going to be very difficult to control what individual does, when they're not in front of you.
I guess this conversation may give a birth to a new era of getting people in and working around. Let's see how it goes. I guess we are progressing towards the end of the pod, but I have some, forward-looking questions. If you could rewind the last year and change one thing, what would it be?
I think it's obvious, like, just be candid about my situation and talk to people. I think integrity is very important, and especially with smaller teams, if that's compromised, even if you leave the organization, it leaves the teams crippled. At the same time, I think founders should also be a little bit more open about their financial situations. Being very candid with you, there have been instances where, people have said something, but behind the scenes, it's something else. Like, it's a two-way street. Like, everyone is in it for something longer run, and I think it requires people to meet in the middle. Like, there is no one side versus another, but, like, everyone at a company early on is like a risk, right? So, like, you never know what happens and what doesn't. So, but that's one thing, that I would definitely change.
You all said, like, you are now committed to one startup, pretty much emerging, Darwin Studios. So what excites you most about the mission or product that makes you so much insisted or so much focus on their work culture or the work? Yeah.
I think it's a market that has not been explored before.
Okay.
And with any new market, there are a lot of hypotheses you have to make, which makes it very exciting, because that's your understanding of the space and the ecosystem, and that might be extremely real, near to the reality, that might be far off. I think startups in general should not be afraid of pivoting, but I'm very bullish in what we're doing. It's also a very difficult engineering problem, right? Like, we've built one of the most complicated, like, workflow orchestration engines, like, in matter of weeks, one of the most complicated, like, user experiences, like, in terms of, like, design and, the capabilities we have, like, to translate that into a interface that is intuitive for the user, but it still abstracts away all the complexity, is an incredibly difficult task, right? I think very few companies do that and pull that right. And then I think the main thing has also been, like, just how, like, people actually are bought in doing this. Like, obviously, we think this can be bigger than anything we've built before, and this is probably going to be one of my, best life's work that I would do. So I'm pretty bullish about it. I'm, trying my best, I guess, in whatever way I can. But, we have a launch in a month. I guess we'll see. But yeah.
I'm also looking forward to Soham Parekh's launching his own product at some point of time, for sure.
100%. There's one in works. We'll keep it open soon. We'll see. I mean, not sure about it, but I don't want to build something impactful, and, we'll see what comes of it.
Cool. I guess, So at last, if you want to share some of your final thoughts or your statement to the public or audience, how it has been, and what's your take after this, and anything. Just,
I mean, I think the only thing I would say is, like, obviously, like, walk in whatever path is correct. And I think India is incredibly slept on by the world in general. And there's a lot of people who are hungry here that want to build, and they want to build good things, and they're not afraid of taking challenges head on. which honestly I also wasn't aware because, like I said, I've not, been to a lot of places. So in general, I would say like I'm pretty bullish now in seeing, where we can go as a country. And it's evident from people moving their offices in India as well back again. So I think we have a lot to show the world, right? And if we can build the same culture that's everywhere else in-house with the same risk tolerance and with the same like bet on longer term vision, then I think we can just turn the situation around. Also, we're a billion of us, so probability of us doing it is higher. But yeah.
Totally bullish, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's wrap, man. Wild story. A lot to unpack. Huge shout out to you for pulling up, taking every question up head on, and just showing you be you. Love or hate, what happened? This convo needed to happen. Cheers.
Thank you so much for having me.